I think there's really two parts to that in sobriety, isn't there? There's the initial early days of sobriety where people are trying to ride those cravings, and becoming more aware, putting that pause in between the initial thought and their actual behavior. I find that helping people move into that mindful space really helps them in putting that pause in, the power of the pause, so that they can make good decisions. And then alcohol, for me personally, and lots of my clients, once you remove alcohol, you become so aware of the nervous system. You become aware, things, gut instinct, like gut instinct is the body talking to us, and our intuition, we become much more aware of it. It becomes heightened. We have this arrested development, especially if we've been drinking since our teenage years, and we aren't aware of our emotions. We aren't aware of energy. It sounds a little woo-woo. It's not. People have energy, and some people give you good energy, some people give you bad energy. And when you remove alcohol a lot of the time is kind of a mask for that. And when we remove it, we become aware of it. So,
and it's at that point that I think a little bit of training in mindfulness is really helpful, because it can be massively overwhelming, can't it, when you discover the feelings that you have been numbing with alcohol for perhaps years. And then as you come out of that, you think, oh, what do I do? And the first instinct, and I know this is something that, you know, clients of mine have talked about and clients of yours have talked about, is that terror of who am I? What am I like? Do I like myself? All of those emotions come into play. And then the loneliness kicks in, and the feeling that, you know, I don't really like who I am now, or I don't know who I am now. And if you have no training in how to deal with that, then one of the first things that can happen is that you just decide to go back to numbing it all out again, and that's where the relapses happen. So mindfulness training helps us to actually retain and maintain that recovery.
And it helps us put some space between us and our feelings. Absolutely. Knowing that we are not our feelings, and they're just something simply that's passing through, and their feedback of that nervous system, knowing that something's not right. And you're quite right. A lot of people describe it as a tidal wave, like this tidal wave of emotions, and it can be scary in the early days. So it is working out, how do we work through those emotions in a way that feels safe. You mentioned there's certain symptoms. People think of withdrawal as the medical part of withdrawal, but actually anyone who's drinking, no matter what amount, there are certain symptoms they will see. There's the fatigue, the anxiety, irritability, and dysphoria. So feeling like, I'm not really satisfied with life. And that mindfulness can be such a huge tool. It really is such a good tool to deal with all of those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And the fact that mindfulness, unfortunately, now has had some bad rep, I think, over the last few years, because it's a buzzword. You know, it's a mindfulness. Oh yeah, we just be aware of things and sit in a corner and meditate every now and then. There's so much more to it than just doing the meditation exercises. It's a whole lifestyle approach. And looking at the way that our lives are, mindfulness brings us into all of the things that you were talking about earlier. Nutrition, you know, being mindful of what you eat, how you eat it, when you eat it, let alone what you're eating. All of those you can be mindful about. Mindful shopping sounds so woo-woo and so geeky, but it's actually paying attention to what you're doing and what you're picking up, because supermarkets are so clever.
Yeah. And if we flip that from mindful shopping, mindful connection, and if we flip it to the other way of mindless shopping and mindless connection and mindless eating, that we all know that where there's no awareness, we can sit on the sofa and eat and eat and eat and not have any kind of awareness of what's going into our bodies. As soon as we practice mindfulness throughout the day proactively, it is, as you said, it's something I personally have drawn on it loads. That's where our connection comes in. It's been fantastic for me. And I absolutely attribute the fact that I didn't have a nervous breakdown. Literally, I practiced mindfulness in situations when my body was screaming at me, and it was able to ground me. So Helen, tell me then, what do you recommend? Do you recommend people are proactive in practicing mindfulness? And is that looking at like something on a daily basis?
Absolutely. It's like any habit. You know, any habit you get into, the more you do it, the more you practice it, the more you make it part of your routine, the easier it becomes. I was listening to an interview with, I think it was Dame Maggie Smith, and she was talking to another great dame. She was talking to Joan Collins. And Dame Maggie was saying, "Oh, I can't exercise, and I'm creaking and I'm groaning." And they're of a similar age; they're in their 80s or getting up to their 80s. And dear Joan Collins said, "Well, I've been doing exercise as a regular thing every morning since I was a teenager. So I don't think about it now. So I get up and I do an hour's exercise and it just happens. I don't even have to think about it." And Maggie's going, "Oh, I couldn't possibly do that." But that is the perfect example. You just make it something that's part of your day. So find a space that works for you. I'm really bad at this. As a mindfulness teacher, I will freely admit I am really, really bad at putting mindfulness in a routine in my day. But I have certain activities that I do that I always do mindfully. And one of them, I'm a great tea drinker, one of them is making a cup of tea.
Okay, so talk me through that. What does a mindful cup of tea look like?
Well, a mindful cup of tea looks like, first of all, I recognize that I do actually need that, and it is thirst and it's tea that I'm after. So I'm actually aware of myself wanting tea. I know that sounds daft, but someone will say, "Do you fancy a drink? Do you fancy a cup of tea?" And you'll go, "I'm not sure." So that is actually part of my mindful approach.
And that sounds like that power of the pause, right? Of taking a moment and going, right, what does my body need right now? And just putting that pause in. So simple, yet so powerful.
Absolutely. And that pause then takes me to the kettle. And from then, it really becomes a little bit like, you might have seen the Japanese tea ceremonies and those kind of things. It becomes that. There is a ritual to, I love making tea because there is a ritual to it. I cheat now, I use tea bags, but there's the whole idea of I pick up the kettle, I feel the weight of the kettle in my hand, and by feeling the weight of the kettle in my hand, I can tell whether or not I need to put more water in it. But I'm actually consciously aware of picking it up and weighing it. And so I'm going, "Oh yes, that is a thing." And I'm focused on that. Nothing else. I'm just focused on how full is the kettle. I fill the kettle to the appropriate level, being mindful of how much water I'm using and thinking of the environment. And I take a moment to think of that. And then the kettle goes on. Then I select my mug. My mug is important. It depends on what time of day it is as to which mug I will have as you clutch your morning mug.
But like toddlers, right? We laugh at toddlers wanting the blue cup or and throwing a tantrum, but as adults, we're no different.
We are no different. No, I have particular mugs that I prefer, and it does vary at time of day. So there's the big mug for the morning tea, and there's the reasonable fine china for the sort of treat mid-morning tea, and there's the solid mug for that. I won't go through all my mugs, but choosing my mug is a thing. So I choose the mug. Now the kettle is happily doing its thing while I'm doing this, so I choose the mug and I set myself out. Now, if I was making tea properly, this is where I'd start sniffing the tea leaves and doing all of that, but I cheat. I use a tea bag, but I keep my tea bags in a particular tin, and it's a tin that my husband gave to me, and it's got an elephant pattern on it, and it's really lovely, and it makes a terrible stain on the work surface, and I don't care because I love the tin. So picking up the tin for my tea always gives me that moment of I feel cherished because this was given to me. It's got a nice feel to it. It has a nice texture to it. It's smooth and the colors are vibrant. And so I just enjoy a moment of looking at that tin and remembering how good it makes me feel. Tea bag goes in the mug. By the time I've finished faffing about with all of this, the kettle's ready. Pour the water in. Must be boiling. Sorry, very British. And then tea needs to steep. So what do you do while your tea is steeping? Mindfully, what I usually do if I'm feeling capable of it is I'll do a few stretches or knee bends or some kind of little physical activity. If I'm feeling particularly excitable, I'll dance around the kitchen, which is always hilarious to anyone who's viewing it, and usually there's no one viewing it, but I will do something physical while that is happening, so that I'm moving my body for a couple of minutes, because it's a dead couple of minutes and I wouldn't be doing anything with it otherwise. Then it's back to the tea, check the colour, quick sniff, lovely, take the tea bag out, put the milk in. Tea is then made. That's what, about 5 minutes? But that is all I've been focused on for 5 minutes.
Yeah. And as you say, it is like anything, it is consistently doing it so that when times are tough, it's instinct, it's a reflex that we draw on this of it's okay. Life might be really overwhelming right now and there's a lot of noise, but I know that I can focus my mind on this cup of tea that's in front of me. I know that I can just concentrate on, okay, what can I touch? What can I smell? What can I hear? What can I taste? And really just focusing the mind on that. And it's such a powerful thing to do.
It is. And as you say, it takes you through all the senses. I mentioned every single one of them there.
Yeah.
You know, everything about it, listening to the kettle boiling, the smells, the tastes, the physical feelings of what I'm doing, the feeling and sight of the tea caddy, all of those things are just grounding me in that moment. And being very traditionally British, of course, if I'm in a moment of stress, what do I turn to? Tea.
Tea.
So,
absolutely.
You know, so there it is. There's my tea ritual, which when I'm stressed and when I'm feeling, you know, overwhelmed, I'll have a cup of tea. And part of the reason it works is because I allow myself that focus and that concentration, and that slows down the nervous system. It just means that I'm breathing gently. The exercise that I do brings that nervous system down again.
Absolutely, moves us into that rest and digest state.
Absolutely.
And anybody that is finding that they, I mean, especially in sobriety, but in life, where life is really stressful for us in this modern age where we are available 24 hours on our phone, where we have social media that we are constantly scrolling, where we are told to hustle, we have the work culture, we also are supposed to socialize, exercise, all these things, and it's non-stop. And actually for our nervous system, it's extremely overwhelming, isn't it? And stress leads to so many things. It leads to us drinking coffee because we haven't slept well. It leads to us not breathing properly. It leads to tension in the body. It leads to autoimmune diseases, and lots of people leaning on alcohol to de-stress and what they think has helped them sleep. And simply taking that time out to be mindful